Jim, do you want to sing the national anthem tonight? Come on. Good evening, everyone. We always start each of our meetings with a word of prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would like to, you're more than welcome to join us. Bow, please. Lord God, we thank you for the opportunity to be here. We thank you for your goodness and your mercy. We pray for our decisions tonight, Lord. We pray that your will be done and your blessings upon us and upon this city. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is now in order. Mr. Garrett, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hawkins? Here. Mr. Grimes?
Here.
Mr. Pruitt? Here. Ms. Mel?
Here.
Mr. Ledbetter? Here. Ms. Isby?
Here.
All right, Ms. Smith is out of town with her church, and Mr. Jones is tied up at work currently. You should have received copies of the May 23rd, 2017 council minutes. Any corrections or changes?
Make a motion to approve as submitted. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0. We're going to briefly recognize some folks that really need some recognition tonight. Our public safety employees, starting with the fire department. Chief Winter, who's going to speak for your group tonight? Come on up, Chief Winter. All these guys that are getting recognized tonight, Chief Ledbetter and I hired them. What really tickles Mark and I about this is a couple of them are getting gray-headed, so. Come on up, Mike. You can.
As you all are aware, the evening of April 29th, the morning of April 30th, the city of Conway, as well as Faulkner County, received torrential rainfall. During that night, fire department, police department, dispatch, street department, even the mayor got out and was helping protect property and save lives. Our firefighters alone, I believe a little over 40 individuals were pulled out of cars as they tried to cross flooded streets and were stranded out during that evening. Shortly after the last unit checked back into the station, on the morning of the 30th, we received a mutual aid call for a swift water rescue in Nova. We were told that there was a lady that was trying to cross the raging waters. Her vehicle had been swept off the road. She had been swept out of the car, and she was fighting for her life, hanging in a tree in the water. Half of her body was in the water, half was out. We immediately deployed our swift water team to the scene. Upon arrival, we deployed the boat with 4 technicians, swift water technicians in the boat. We had 3 rope technicians on land. We quickly realized that the water was so rapid, our boat motor could not overcome the water. Chief Irwin, the commander on scene, ordered the rope personnel to rig a mechanical advantage, which supplied ropes. And in conjunction with the ropes and the motor, we were able to get into the water, get in position to make it to the female that was trapped in the tree. Due to the rapid water, it had created a wave just in front of the victim, which created tremendous problems for our access. As we backed over the water, the wave, of course, the water came into the boat, filled the boat up, which decreased the stability and mobility of the boat. After several efforts to try and get to the victim, unsuccessfully, it was determined that one of our swimmers would go in the water. Justin Martin was the elected one. He grabbed an extra life jacket, went into the water, and successfully made his way to the victim. us is the water game up.
Hold up, guys. Appreciate Chief Winter giving me a breakdown like that. Now, people don't understand it's not wrong water. Conway Fire Department really suffered along the lines, not only the victim, which they didn't. They maintained and did the right thing and they listened, but they almost suffered loss of one of their own. But they didn't. They never lost their composure. They were not gonna lose one of their own, and they were not gonna lose a victim. Great job, gentlemen. Okay.
It's okay for now, please. That's the one.
Thank you, Brian.
Next up, we have Major William Tapley, who is standing in for the police chief tonight, who is under the weather, and Mr. Randy Scott, who's the regional program manager for the CALEA program, and he's a retired master sergeant with Oklahoma City Police Department, and he's here to talk about Conway PD's recertification.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, citizens. On behalf of CALEA, I first would like to also congratulate that fire department. We're all come from a family, and law enforcement and fire services, public safety to the citizens, and I think that's I think another round of applause for those people is really worth notification. I'm here tonight to present an award to, an accreditation award to the Conway Police Department for this will be their 5th award of accreditation, presented from CALEA, the Commission on Accreditation. I'd kind of like to tell you a little bit about CALEA and how they got to this point with their 5th award, if you don't mind, just a few minutes. CALEA was actually created in 1979, but it started just prior to, if you think about the turmoil in law enforcement that some of us can remember back in the 70s and early 70s, and they were trying to look for standards to develop for, to put law enforcement in a line sight of a standard and professionalism that they thought that needed to be. At that point, a grant was issued by the Department of Justice, and that grant was issued to the National Sheriff's Association, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, and the Police Executive Research Forum. Those 4 founding agencies were the ones that actually started CALEA and issued the first round of standards in 1979. Since that time, 21 commissioners now are appointed to represent those 4 founding agencies. Those are all volunteer commissioners. We just had one here with us today from Little Rock, which is Chief Kenton Buckner is a CALEA commissioner. Those commissioners are, 11 of them are from law enforcement agencies. They're either a chief, a sheriff, a director of a college, something of that nature. The other 10 are mayors. There's a sitting Supreme Court justice out of South Carolina that's a commissioner right now. There's also a state senator out of Connecticut. So they're going to be from public sector. They're the ones that oversee the standards. Those were written, the standards basically to cover administrative, operational, logistical, and just as a modern management tool for a professional law enforcement agency to recognize their excellence. Based on CALEA and what they put forward in those days, I can't think of a better time, because of the way law enforcement has been in the eye in the last couple of years, to present an award of this nature to the Conway Police Department, which shows a huge dedication. I'm going to, in a few moments, hand out a matted certificate. That means pretty much it's a matted certificate, but it's a deeper meaning to the officers and I believe this council of the public safety responsibilities that the Conway Police Department is putting forward. They're now learning to do things the right way, do it the way they want to do it the right way, put the standards and put their policies in place. They adhere to a professional code of excellence. Their willingness to change, and because law enforcement changes, they have a willingness to change pretty rapidly because of the way the standards are developed. Back earlier at the end of last year, 3 assessors came in here, or correct me, 2 assessors came in here to review 484 standards that this police department had to meet. They did a gold standard assessment. Gold standard assessment is a little more in-depth, where they do interviews with the officers, they do interviews with the community. They may have interviewed some of you all, as a matter of fact. That makes it a little more intense than just the first 4 accreditations they went through, actually, because it's a little deeper look, because they're still adhering to the policies and the procedures, but how in-depth are they getting involved in the community? They find that they are more involved in the community, and with that, they presented a report, and with that report, went before those 21 commissioners in March, and were presented with their accreditation and awarded and voted upon after being, the chief had to, and I believe you're there also, Mayor, as they answered questions from the commissioners as they questioned them about the report. So with that said, if you don't mind, I'd like to see if you'd step up and we can give you a certificate.
I was there. All I did was sit and smile. Chief Spradlin carried the ball from start to finish and did an outstanding job.
So on behalf of Kalia, congratulations on receiving your 5th accreditation award for excellence.
Thank you very much.
I hope everyone's as proud of our police and fire departments as I am. We've really got something going great here at Conway with these guys and ladies. They do an outstanding job. Mr. Winningham. Next, we'll have our monthly financial reports ending in May 31st of 2017.
We look a little better than last month, which is what, it's kind of what I told y'all last month. April didn't look too hot. May looks better. You can see we've got, we received a good chunk of money in our ad valorem revenue there. It's down a little from last year, which means that overall collections for the county must be down as well. You know, we don't get, our money is received is based on what the county actually collects in taxes as opposed to what they bill. So if that number's down, it's because collections are down, and hopefully between now and the October due date, we get some people paying in and help us get that number looking a little bit better. Our sales tax number was up again. It was up a little over 2% in May compared to May of last year. Year to date, we're up almost 4%. With sales tax being up, you can still see our bottom line. We're showing just a slight net expense for the year. June is going to be a little bit challenging for us as well. It's going to be a 3 pay period month. We will get another county receipt for the ad valorem, but it's not going to be another $800,000. You can see on the expenditure side, all of our departments are continue to hold their spending down. Our average for this time of year would be about a 41%, and you can see none of the managed departments are even at 40. Everybody's at 39 or below, so everybody is doing a good job on their spending. Hopefully just our revenue side can pick up. Hopefully sales tax can stay up between now and the end of the year. And then, like I said, hopefully that ad val will come in as well. We'll wrap up our audit, hopefully hopefully this week. We've got some of our outside agencies we'll have to wait on before the actual report can be issued, but they've done their field work, and we should have a good draft by the end of this week. At that point, we'll be able to go back and make some accrual entries as well, which will, because right now there's, well, for instance, in the franchise fees, we're probably missing a month there because January gets counted back. But we can, once we know how 16 looks final-wise, we can go back and make some accrual entries on 17, and that'll look a little bit better as well. Street and sanitation fund both look to be in really good position going forward, both showing healthy net revenue figures for the year. I hope everybody saw the email I sent out this afternoon about the airport. The financials in the packet are not correct for the airport, but I emailed out a set of corrected this afternoon, and if you guys look at those and have any questions or comments, feel free to get with me on that. That concludes my comments on anything. Does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to go over in more detail?
I have a question, if I could, please. On
Sure.
the expenditure on the very first page,
Mhm.
non-departmental is substantially over where we bought something for somebody that, can you explain that?
It's non-departmental is where we record our insurances, our property and insurance, and then our dues to the municipal league, which are all due in January. So that's just a front-loaded expense.
Front-loaded. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions?
Make a motion for approval of the financials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of the financials for May 31st, ending May 31st. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Winningham. Next up, we have a report of our standing committees, starting with Community Development. Mr. Hawkins, you're up, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item on this portion of the agenda is a resolution requesting the Faulkner County Tax Collector place liens on property located at 1025 Knights Drive as a result of incurred expenses by the city. Is there an owner of property or a representative of property at 1025 Knights Drive with us this evening? Don't see anyone, Mr. Mayor. We have a resolution to read for this item. It's Resolution R-17. 23.
Make a motion for adoption of the resolution.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution, place a lien of $264.20 on property located at 1025 Knights Drive. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? 6-0, Mayor.
Thank you. Passes 6-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is another resolution requesting the county tax collector place liens on property at, this one is at 1521 Hardy, 1521 Hardy Street as a result of incurred expenses. Is there a representative or an owner of property at 1521 Hardy Street with us this evening? Mr. Mayor, I don't see anyone. We have a resolution to be read for this. It's Resolution R-1724.
Okay, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to place a lien for 33607 for property located at 1521 Hardy Street. Any further discussion?
Not
Mr.
any
I'm
further
sorry. Go ahead.
discussion, just a question. On the incident report, it says 1521 and 1523. Is that because it's a duplex or? Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Garrett.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? 6-0, Mayor.
Passes 6-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is consideration to approve agreements for Arvest Bank and Park Place PUD for the College and Salem Roundabout project for the Street and Engineering Department. And Jack, welcome. How are you, sir?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. What can you tell us?
Well, we need to get these approved so we can start construction to finish by the end of the year.
This is land acquisition, is that correct?
Yes, sir. This is the Arvest and the Park Place PUD. They're at the corner of College and Salem.
It's like 71,000, is that correct?
Yes,
For
sir.
Harvest, is that right?
Yes, sir. And I think it's $50,080 for the Park Place PUD.
Any further discussion?
So are we approving all of them, or are we doing them one at a time?
Approving all, both of them.
Yeah,
We're not-
both of them.
Both.
the same-
Two were
Both of them
together.
in the same one.
Do I have a motion?
So moved for approval of the
Okay, we have a
agreement.
motion and a second to approve entering into these two agreements. Any further discussion?
Any estimate on when this might be ready to operate?
From what I was talking to Finley before coming in here, if we were able to get this approved tonight, then we have the notice proceed ready to give to the contractor tomorrow. We should be finished by the end of the year. We're looking to get everything, all the bills paid by the end of the year.
Is there, I'm just talking now, is there a reason to maybe not do this right in the middle of school starting, or?
Yes. So, I appreciate you giving me practice to answer questions and everything.
I wanted you to feel at home.
Thank you, thank you. So this was done in partnership with the county, and the county judge had this money to be, I guess, obligated or money to be spent this year.
Okay.
So he can't spend any of this money in 2018, and,
You've said enough.
hey, thank you.
Thank you. I'm good.
Mr. Garrett?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 6-0.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
I appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Jack. Mr. Hawkins?
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is resolution to condemn property at the corner of College and Salem. And this is what we've just received, or we received just prior to this meeting, I do believe. And I've not had a chance to look at that. Is that what this is, Mr. Clausen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good, thank
I
you.
provided that. I'm sorry that I didn't get it to you
Oh, that's okay.
beforehand, but you should have a copy in front of you.
Okay.
So this is the resolution to condemn for the Walgreens property of that roundabout. Talking to Finley, he had said that in his dealings with Walgreens in the past, that they just prefer to do the condemnation, that it is on the timeline that we're on, is near impossible to get the right lawyer on the phone to even deal with them.
And if I'm not mistaken, when we did it over on Harkrider and Oak, there was an issue too. We had to do a condemnation just because that's what they preferred. And so that's what we're doing. And I don't think it was contentious before, but this just allows us to kind of continue on with their time schedule since we have agreements with the other two entities.
How much of that berm is this gonna take out?
I think a decent portion of it.
Will it be, will something be rebuilt to,
To keep the parking lot?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
okay,
There's a wall going on up there.
Taking about 5 of the parking places is Dr. Thornberry's, is that correct?
I believe that's about right.
Okay.
Is it gonna be the same wall, or is it gonna be like a retaining wall?
It'll be a retaining wall holding that back, I believe. I haven't got to look at the, all the plans, but the brief look that I saw a nice retaining wall to hold up that parking lot on Walgreens and everything.
I believe it's gonna be that interlocking block,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like that. I think they used some on Dave Ward, similar to that.
It'll be real nice.
It'll look better.
Make a motion to approve the resolution.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
That's be resolution R 1725. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 6-0.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Jack. Mr. Hawkins?
next item, Mr. Mayor, is consideration to approve the nomination of Michael Yoder for a second term on the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Board and I move that we accept that nomination.
Second.
We have a motion second to approve the nomination of Mr. Michael Yoder to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Board. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
passes 6-0. Mr. Hawkins?
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance appropriating grant funds for the Spencer Street Brownfield Cleanup Project. And, good evening. You're always the man to talk about brownfield cleanup.
So that particular one is expenses that we've already spent, that we've received money in from EPA for reimbursement for those expenses. So,
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to waive 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Ordinance
Passes.
number, Mr. Garrett?
The O-1763.
63.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance and the emergency clause. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance and the emergency clause. Any further discussion? I'm sorry?
Well,
Yes.
just a quick related question. Scott, I've noticed that these little construction fencing's going up around that. Does that mean something's happening real soon?
yes. So the contractors are trying to get on site and mobilize to start the cleanup. Because of the sporadic rain that we've had over the last few months, it's kind of delayed their process. But they're expecting to get out there, if not by the end of this week, for sometime next week. That's our hope.
Good.
So,
We need to back up just a little bit. The emergency clause is not in this ordinance, Ms. Whitmore.
In the heading. Okay.
It is.
It wasn't in the body.
Declaring an emergency.
Yep.
Was that an oversight? Do we want to pass it with an emergency clause? Mr. Grummer?
I'm so,
It
is this for the appropriation?
There wasn't an emergency clause listed in the body of the ordinance. Would you,
But
do you
it was
want that
in
amended
No,
in
I mean-
there, or is it?
Oh, are we, this is on number, this is Pat, we just did 63, right? So this
Yes,
is
sir.
the next one.
And we're still on 63.
63 has an emergency clause in the heading, but not in the body.
Yes, so those, I would, only because those are expenses that we need to go ahead and pay some bills that have already been,
Okay. So I have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance with emergency clause. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
In the emergency clause, Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Both of those pass 6-0. Mr. Hawkins?
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance appropriating match funds and extending an expiration period for the EPA Brownfield Grant cleanup at 1110 Spencer Street. That's formerly the scrap metal yard property. And Mr. Grummer, going to talk about this real quickly.
so in 2014, when the EPA grant was awarded, the city council approved the match funding for the percentage that we had, which was $40,000. But we had an expiration of that match in January of 2017. We anticipated to have the cleanup done by now, but because of some of the design factors, it got us extended out. The actual grant expires in October of 2018, so we're just asking to extend that match out until the end of the grant cycle.
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings. Second.
Have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance, which should be 064. Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
Mr. Hawkins?
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance accepting and appropriating donation funds for the Conway Historic District Commission and Commissioner Training. And we have an ordinance to read for this item. It's ordinance O-1765.
Make a motion that we waive the readings. Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
This is basically an accounting ordinance.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance. Second.
We have a motion and second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Passes 6-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance to rezone property located at 1616, 1620, and 1624 Robinson Avenue. It's presently zoned R2A. The requested zoning is a PUD, and this was reviewed by the Planning Commission at their meeting on June 19th, and at that time, the commission voted 7-1 to forward this to City Council with a approval recommendation, including some PUD final development plan conditions that are listed below. And those conditions are listed on your sheet. There are 6 conditions, and there are some additional suggested conditions made by area residents. With that all in play, there's an ordinance to be read. It's ordinance 01766.
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
We have a motion and a second to waive 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0. Take a motion for the adoption of the ordinance.
I'll make a motion for adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance. Any further discussion?
See, we have Mr.
Well, before we
Nobody
go,
say anything.
Yes.
yeah, I'd love to let it keep going, but I think the applicant would like to address at least the condition number 8 and the thing I gave you right before the meeting there. There was a mistake on our part where we put that in as a condition that the Plan Commission passed, but actually number 8 as worded was not. That was some suggested language that was happened before and after the meeting about owners shall designate a resident manager to ensure timely roll, cart, curb collection, placement, and retrieval. And I believe the applicants aren't real happy with the way that's worded, and I'll let them speak to that. But that was a suggestion on the part of the neighbors because that was part of some discussion at the PUD pre-meeting when we had a public input meeting. So I'll let them visit on that a little bit if you like. And then the other thing I just wanted to clarify was the fence design. There was on number 7, privacy fencing shall be required on the north property line. There was also an additional line that the Planning Commission did want to include, which included a light blocking double-sided fence. And since then, I've also talked to the applicants, and what I've suggested is instead of a double-sided fence, basically they build one like Kroger did, the new Kroger, where you had Rosewood Terrace next door, and it's basically an overlapping type fence, and it's a little bit better maintenance-wise and easier to keep and build as opposed to a double fence. And I think the applicants are okay with that change in conditions. But I believe Mr. Pillow wanted to address that condition number 8 and just anything else you might have any questions or concerns about.
Brian, before you sit down,
Yes, sir.
the suggested conditions by the residents, were they included in what was voted on, or were they not included?
That was not included in what was voted on, and that's number 8. And
So-
number 8 should have said, basically, the minimum number of trash cans as allowed by ordinance will be provided and used. That was what was
So
passed by
1
the
through
Planning Commission.
6 is what was voted on by the Planning Commission, is that
Well, they
correct?
actually voted on all of those. Yeah, maybe we shouldn't have done it that way, but basically, they approved all of those as written in the black lines. So the red lines are the ones that were either a modification on our part or suggestion of the neighbors. Does that make sense?
Brian, before you turn it over, could you explain exactly what that number 8 means, the minimum number of trash containers? And what does that exactly mean?
Well, the intent was trying to limit the number of trash cans because there's
So
going
the
to be
green- the green
altogether
ones?
12 multifamily units and the 2 old historic apartments and then a new apartment building that would have 4 units, so there'd be 12 total. And the fear of the neighbors was there'd just be, 2 cans for each unit out there, one recycle, one trash cart, rolling, lining the streets. And probably there will be some actually on Robinson, and there'll be some around Ash Street, just the way it'll work. But, and I think the Greg and the others can touch on that a little bit, but basically when they have similar developments and they say they don't need a can for each unit, usually it's like a can for every 2 units or so, so there won't be as many cans out there. But number 8, to answer the question directly, was a limit, trying to come up with wording that would limit the number of trash cans.
I mean, what would that limit be?
Right.
I don't know that there is a hard limit. I guess our sanitation department could speak to that one maybe as far as what they want to see required, but
How would they do that? Would they split the bill? If you only get half a trash can, do you pay half the bill?
I don't know.
Breaking new ground here.
I mean, I wouldn't wanna pay full price if I only get half a trash can.
Sure, sure. I'll turn to our applicants maybe to help answer that question, because I know they've talked about doing that at some other locations, so. But anyway, number 8 was an attempt to try to limit the number of trash cans. It was just saying basically get it down to the barest minimum needed.
Am I good to go? Hey, I'm Greg Pillow. Thank y'all for letting me speak about this. I'm just going to touch on this matter. So, I think the intent of the neighbors were, like he said, to not have a bunch of trash cans sitting out there. And so at our input meeting, we said, like Brian said, we said, hey, Steve has a development where he actually has a person that kind of designated to carry those off. But we don't want to be restricted to that as a solution. We think there'll be responsible people here carrying their carts. If they're not, then, we'll do whatever we can, but we also assume there's some type of city ordinance or rule against leaving your cans out all week. I don't know if that's something that's in play, but, we're willing to accommodate the neighbors. We just don't want it to be in writing that we have to designate a person to roll them back. There may be other solutions to that we don't want to be tied to that, so. That's why we don't want that in there. Any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Wait, I'm sorry. Are we gonna leave 8 in there?
Yeah, I didn't hear any.
This 8.
They were okay with 8 as written, but they didn't like the red letter, red wording that's there, basically. So if you want to strike red.
Well, here's the thing, the way it's written, they can designate someone,
Right.
but doesn't mean they're gonna do it. It just says they're gonna designate it, and what is timely, and, it's pretty vague.
Yeah, what are you gonna do to punish the resident that doesn't enforce? I just think 8 needs to be out completely. It doesn't make any sense to me. And there's no way to, like you said.
To enforce it.
I think the time limit, isn't it 24 hours, or is it 24 hours? If you're picking up on a Wednesday, you can have it out 24 hours prior and then 24 hours, or 24 hours prior and then 24 hours after? Or is it just
I think
straight
it's even a
24
little bit
hours?
tighter than
I
that.
think so too.
I think it's like 5 o'clock the
5
day
o'clock
before.
Chuck's trying to find
I'm
it.
seeing if I can't find it real quick.
Man, they're right back there.
Joe Hopper, is
I
he back
understand the
there?
intent. I agree, we don't want a dozen trash cans half full lined up, but
I think it's 24 hours.
24 hours total?
You have to take it in 24 hours after it's picked up.
Okay.
Is anyone else in the city allowed half of a trash can or a certain percentage of a trash can? Now, the way it's billed. Is anyone allowed only half of a trash can now? Like, okay, so this is
But like
brand
with
new.
some apartment buildings though, forgo the green trash cans and have a dumpster.
The
But so that's how the bigger ones kind of
Take care
solve
of it.
that.
That's not a possibility here, I assume?
Probably like
No.
a dumpster, even less.
So probably the minimum is gonna
I mean-
be one for each person who has a Conway Court bill.
Right.
And I
So
think
that's
room
the
plays into
minimum.
play here, how much
Yeah.
available space they have.
Can't charge full price for someone that only gets half a can.
Yeah.
It's just my thought. It's common sense.
Any further discussion?
8's in or 8's out? What are you saying?
I say it's out. Until we can get some clarification on it.
Well, number 8 just by itself before the red really means nothing. It's one per unit. It's the 12.
Right.
So that doesn't do anything, which is why I think you probably added some of that red wording. The way I read the red wording, they have to designate somebody, but there's no penalty for him not doing his job.
So we want to exclude number 8 this time? Is it- I'll need a motion, I'll need a motion to exclude number 8, and then we'll move forward with the ordinance.
Does anybody else have any comment on it? Does anybody that lives in the neighborhood here to talk?
Doesn't look like it.
So we're excluding 8?
Yes.
All right, I'll take a motion to exclude number 8.
I make a motion to exclude number 8.
Second it.
We have a motion and a second to exclude number 8. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0. Now let's move forward. We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance excluding number 8. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt? Aye. Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Passes 6-0. Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance to rezone property located south of Dave Ward Drive, west of South Salem, north of Pheasant Road from RU1, MF1, and R1, all to MF3. This was reviewed by the Planning Commission at their meeting on May 15th of this year, and at that time, the commission voted 6-4 that this request be sent to City Council with a recommendation for approval. Commissioners Armstrong, Hervey, Rye, and Ingram were voting in opposition to that. And, we have an ordinance for this item. It's ordinance 01767.
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
No, oh, wait, sorry.
Sorry?
This was the one that was held, this was the one held last time, right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. I was not here, I apologize. What was the reason that it was held?
That we were short, a couple of council members
Well, no,
that particular
they
night.
wanted to, yeah,
I think
they wanted to
Sullivan-
work
I think
out
Sullivan-
some of the
I think
concerns.
Yeah,
Yeah.
requested,
Work out
along
with
with
the
the neighbors, y'all requested we pull it back, did you not?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So I guess then the question is, anybody want to talk about what's going on since then?
I see you nod. Okay, go ahead. Very good.
Thank you. I'm Brent Salter with Salter Properties, 201 Lee Andrew Lane. So we held any sort of public comment last week from speaking with the property owners to our south to have an opportunity to speak with them before we brought it back to council for a full vote. So that's where we are today. I'm happy to give my speech, if you will, that I was prepared to give last week. But to keep it short, I know that I've written a lot of letters. I hope that you've gotten them. I hope that you've read them. In a nutshell, what we're looking to do is expand the complex that we have existing, which is the Brentwood Apartments that are currently on Dave Ward. This property is adjacent to it. It'll be connecting through internal roads, and we'll be placing the clubhouse and the amenities that are required from today's resident there on Salem Road as it's developed over the years. Came to the Planning Commission meeting. After the Planning Commission meeting, spoke with the property owners, addressed some of their concerns in my first letter to the council. At the last city council meeting, there were some more concerns that they brought up. That's why we tabled it. We've met with them. We've done what we feel like we can to address their concerns and to explain further what our project looks like. One thing that I put together that I feel like was kind of interesting, if you don't mind, I'll bring it. So the fact that you can still get all of this off Google Earth is amazing to me. But there was a lot of conversation about they've lived there for a long time, and so I wanted to go back and see what did this area look like in the past and how has it changed over the years. So as you can see, in 1990, the Arco manufacturing facility was there. It's still there today, functioning as something else. That's still what the dirt is zoned for today. There's one home on Pheasant. 2002, you can see the first apartments that go in. There's homes on Napa Valley. There's still one home on Pheasant. Covington Center goes in. 2005, we build the Brentwood Apartments. There's additional homes that have been built. The daycare is put in. We're now looking at 3 homes on Pheasant. 2006, you can see there's a lot of activity. Brentwood townhomes are now built. The bank's under construction. There's 4 homes there on Pheasant. 2010, 30 homes are built in Brookstone, which is adjacent to the shares a property line with the apartments that are there. There's now 13 homes on Napa Valley. So I say all that to say that I can definitely understand that when they moved into this place that, you know, they were out in the country, if you will, but there's been a lot of development. There's been a lot of development next door that proves that a multifamily development does not kill a single-family home project that's right next door. And so that was what we wanted to meet with the current property owners with. We've heard their concerns. We have committed to doing everything in our power to ensure that they have the privacy that everyone wants in their backyard. So not only all of those facts, but it's also, this piece of property is also in the comprehensive plan to be a multifamily use. So with that, if there's not any questions, I would just ask that you would approve this rezoning request to multifamily.
Any other questions, Mr. Salter? Would anyone else like to speak? Come on up.
Hey, my name's Henry Zimrevner. Live at 2990 Pheasant Road. Speak on behalf of my wife and myself. And we did meet with Salter Properties, and we appreciate, you know, their candor and their explanation of everything. But we feel like the rezoning of 2902 Pheasant Road is not appropriate, as it's not consistent with the zoning of the rest of the neighborhood known as Homestead Acres. We've been residents there since 1992, and we feel the rezoning of 2902 Pheasant Road destroys the integrity of the neighborhood. In other words, you're just taking one part of it and pulling it out. We also feel the rezoning of 2955 Dave Ward Drive, the south wind of which borders the entire north boundary of our property, is not appropriate, and we would have a negative impact on our quality of life. Simply put, we just don't want to have apartments, you know, in that location on the northern border. We feel our property values will suffer, and the Salters did address our concerns, but we still have concerns about drainage, loss of green space, light and noise pollution, traffic burden is estimated to be at 850 trips per day on the Salem Road. And the other thing, and the Planning Commission, from their data, roughly calculated this MF3 zoning has a potential for approximately 333 units. And if each unit has 2 bedrooms, potentially housing 4 people, full capacity could be somewhere around 1,332 people. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
I'm Casper Zimrevner, his brother, of course. That's why I bought the house next to him. I built the house next to him. My main concern is Salter does not own the property. Okay? They go out and something falls through with the deal they have with the owner of the property, we're stuck with what this is. And I'd like y'all to put something in there that would say, hey, if the deal falls through, this starts all over again. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to do. You know, we've been there for a while. And another thing is, if y'all approve that R1 to be MF, it should be MF1, not MF3. That's that close, it shouldn't be MF3, that close to our neighborhood like that. I think that's a fair deal too. So that's all I have.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I didn't come prepared to speak, but I live next door also
Could you
at
state your name, please, for the record?
Lesta Eberhard, and my mother and I and husband live at 3010 Pheasant Road. We've only been there a year, and our property is $325,000 home on 2.2 acres, and we do love the green belt around us, but My argument would be more that if the property's going to be developed next to us, which they have every right to do, it shouldn't be such nice homes next to apartments. There should be a more gradual zoning next to each other. Am I saying that right? That it shouldn't be such a drastic rezoning next to those homes. So I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Hawkins, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'm Gene Salter, 201 Lee Andrew. I'm the original owner and developer of the Brentwood Apartments. In our conversations with the neighbors, just to let you know that we did agree to an 8-foot privacy fence around the property. We also agreed to 2-story buildings only on that adjoining property line, with no visibility from an apartment complex into their residential area. So there'll be no windows for, tenants to be looking out the back of their property, as well as from their backyard, they'll be looking at a building that has, a brick wall on the lower portion with a siding on the upper portion with no windows for viewing either direction as far as that goes. So we did try to accommodate and try to assess and meet any of the requests that they have. Some of the things that'll be issues, as you know, will be addressed through the planning department, such as the drainage, as the lighting. All those things have yet to be taken care of. And it'll all be done according to ordinance, or we won't get a permit to build. So it'll be under all the standard regulations that are already imposed on any development. So I'd just like for you to encourage you to vote to allow this project. And personally, I have no qualms with a limit being put on the Salter family as far as that goes. If not, someone else can enjoy this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salter. Anyone else?
What's the difference in MF1 and MF3 as far as the density goes?
MF1 allows 12 units per acre, MF2 is 18 units per acre, and MF3 is 24 units per acre.
And Brentwood's MF1?
Brentwood is MF3.
What's MF1 right there?
MF1 is the property bounded by, one up against Salem, basically there. There's like there's 3 tracts of land, basically, that are in play. And you got the MF3, which is the Brentwood Apartments, then you've got the long skinnier strip, which is actually zoned RU1 right now, which used to be industrial too, so it's more or less an industrial-like zone, restricted use zone. And then you got MF1 there along Salem. And then there's a part that's R1 that's actually the lot that's part of Pheasant neighborhood. I can't remember the full name. Homestead Acres, excuse me, I'm sorry. But their request is to make all of that MF3.
And the last question, second to last or third to last question the gentleman had about making sure this stays with the property owner, I didn't get that. I didn't understand what that was.
Well, that would be a condition, and you can't put conditions on a rezoning. I mean, if it was conditional use, sure, you could add that, or a PUD, but with rezonings are either straight up or down.
I don't guess I got what he was asking.
I think he said they don't own the property yet, and so if the deal fell through, it would be zoned that way for somebody else.
Somebody else.
Right.
That's what I understand.
Yeah.
Correct. We have a contingency in our offer that the rezoning has to happen.
Yeah. I mean, for that matter, they could change their mind and they could sell to somebody else too.
Right.
I mean, it's always a possibility in any deal.
Well, that's where you really should just look at it as a land use. I mean, is it appropriate use for regardless of the owner, basically, and make the decision based on that.
That goes back to what Mr. Salter said, though. This is on the master plan for multifamily at this particular location.
shows the portion north of Homewood Estates. Homes- Man, I can't get it right, but anyway, it shows the lots north of there at least as being multifamily anyway.
Thank you, Mark.
I'm just blocked out. I'm outside of the zone that gets notified, but I don't like the R1 to MF at all.
Council, any further discussion or questions? What's your wishes?
We already have a.
Currently got a motion to approve, Mayor, as is.
Have a second.
And a second.
Okay, but no further discussion. Mr. Garrett?
Let's see, this will be ordinance O-1767. Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Passes 6-0. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Before we move on, Chuck's going to clarify something for us.
Okay.
You could throw me under.
Yep.
Oh, okay, so, on your trash cans, you have to put them out no earlier than 5 PM before the day of pickup, and, they have to be back, or taken off the street by 7 PM the day of pickup. If you don't put it within 5 feet of the curb, it is a misdemeanor. So just keep that in mind.
Get you a ticket.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Next up, we have the public service portion of the agenda. First will be Mr. Ibbotson with an ordinance accepting and appropriating funds received for the purchase of the scoreboards at Conway Station Park.
These really are some neat pictures.
Yeah.
Going back to
I know.
1990.
You can go back and trace tornadoes in their routes.
Can you really?
Yeah. It's a fireman thing. Mr. Ibbotson.
Thank you, sir. A couple months ago, we put out requests for sponsorship for scoreboards, to purchase new scoreboards for Conway Station Park. Although the present scoreboards are really cute, they don't work very well at all, never have. We got responses from First Security and Conway Regional Health Systems to sponsor all 9 boards out there. So this is basically just approving the purchase of the scoreboards out of AMP funds and taking, as they make payments, to take their money and put it back into the AMP fund for 9 new scoreboards at Conway Station Park.
Make a motion that we waive the readings. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to waive 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
So the A&P is going to be a bank?
Funnel, I think a funnel.
Is that right?
Mhm.
That's what I thought I heard you say.
They don't charge interest though, do they?
Do you know that?
Not your A&P.
No, no.
City's
that's it.
A&P.
Parks A&P.
Oh, okay.
City
Yeah,
A&P.
the city's A&P.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
I'm sorry.
Thank you for the clarification.
I usually don't come
A
and,
little bit of a problem.
you got that right. My apologies.
Okay.
I make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance. Second.
We have a motion and a second for the adoption of the ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt? Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
Thank
you, Mr.
My
Ibbotson.
maintenance staff appreciates it very much.
Mr. Hopper, you're up next. What we have is a consideration to approve bids for uniforms at the Conway Sanitation Department. And Miss Jamie, you're going to handle this one. All right.
This doesn't look like Mr. Hopper.
Mr. Hopper will follow me up here next. We received 5 bids for sanitation uniforms. Paramount came in as the lowest bid. We've used them since 2011 and have been satisfied with them and would like to continue doing that.
Make a motion that we do that.
Second.
Yeah, we have a motion and a second to approve the bid from Paramount. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett, would you call the vote, please?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? 6-0.
6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. You're doing a great job, by the way.
Thank you.
Next, we have consideration to remove and dispose of assets from inventory for the Department of Sanitation. Mr. Hopper.
This looks like Mr. Hopper. I should have let the other Mr. Hopper handle this one too. So we're continuing to, whittle down some of our old equipment. We don't want our landfill to start looking like a dump. So we've got 3 more. I don't know, one of these things, we don't even know where it came from. It's looks like a food truck, so. But we need to move them along.
Make a motion that we allow you to dispose of these assets.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 6-0. Next, Mr. Hopper is still up. We have ordinance appropriating funds received from the Municipal League Vehicle Program for the Department of Sanitation.
Yes, sir. So we have one vehicle that was involved in a pretty severe accident. We've already, we've had to go ahead and get it fixed, but, and then another one, we've got asset 728, it's a Chevrolet 2500 pickup. It's been repaired. And then we've got asset 907. It was involved in an accident, which was not our fault, so we're still arguing with the insurance company a little bit about that one, but they have cut a check less our deductible. So
Okay.
Make a motion that we waive the readings. And I have it as ordinance 069. Is that correct?
1769.
Mm-hmm.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes 6-0. I'm sorry, any opposed? That passes 6-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance. Second.
Have a motion and a second for the adoption of the ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt? Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. Mr. Hopper, this is a busy night for you. Next, we have
Yes,
an
sir.
ordinance waiving the requirement to obtain competitive bids for equipment repair on front-end loader for the Department of Sanitation. And would you explain to everyone why we're waiving bids on this?
yes, sir. So this fire actually, and I need to point out in the second paragraph of the ordinance, that date should read October 26, 2016, obviously. This truck had a caught fire. The insurance adjuster looked at it and determined that it was an electrical fire, which our insurance claim was denied. We didn't get that information until late November. The truck was delivered to Shipley Motor in Pottsville for. Actually, we were going to try to appeal that one as well after we had it looked at, and once they dug into it, they realized that there was in fact an electrical fire, and it's not covered by our insurance. So in this particular situation, the majority of the cost was labor. The wiring harness on the chassis and on the trash body were both affected, and it took a great deal of time for them to diagnose everything and get the parts and repair it. So generally we wouldn't like to come to you guys this late of a date with an item like this, but in this situation it really, in fact, the next item on the agenda is a front loader as well, and at one point we were down to 1 truck and we run 4. So we were running that truck from early morning till late at night, with different personnel. So it was 2017 hasn't been real friendly to us with regards to equipment. So
How was that claim denied by insurance? Since it was a fire?
They said it's a mechanical breakdown. So, and we talked to the mechanics that worked on it, and generally when you have a fire behind the cab of a garbage truck, it has something to do with refuse getting on the exhaust, and there was no evidence of that when they did the initial I think even our own fire department, claimed the same thing, so.
What year is this model?
This is a 2011.
Okay.
So we want to get a couple more years out of this truck.
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings. Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance along with the emergency clause.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance with the emergency clause. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt? Aye. Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
And the emergency clause, Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Both passed 6-0. Next up, Mr. Hopper, ordinance waiving the requirement to pay competitive bids for equipment repair on the front-end loader, number 829 for the Department of Sanitation.
All right, so this truck, it went down in January of this year, had a catastrophic engine failure. Again, it was taken to Shipley and Pottsville. Initially, they told us that the engine, based on mileage, would be covered under the engine warranty. And they fixed the truck. They put a refurbished engine, a reman engine in the truck, and we got it back in February. And April 20th, I believe, they came to us and told us that Mack Trucks had denied our warranty claim. So we appealed that to the level that we're able without incurring additional cost. The next thing we could do is send it off at our expense to have it, tested by engineers, and so we didn't want to incur that additional cost, actually, because the other thing is this truck, we were pretty tickled when we found out that it was going to be covered under warranty, because this truck was in an accident several years ago, or when it was right after it was brand new, and was turned over. And so I didn't really expect it to be covered under warranty to begin with. But, when they tell you one thing and do another, there's not a whole lot you can really.
Mr. Hopper had discussed this with me, and due to the need for the equipment, I advised him, we agreed that we need to go ahead and get it fixed, because they were running pretty low on equipment, so.
Make a motion that we waive the readings. Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance, and I have it as 1771, along with the emergency clause.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance and the emergency clause. Any further discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Hopper, do we need to look at some different equipment? Because Mack Truck and our friends at Shipley Motor Company don't appear to be doing us right now. Well, there were very unfortunate circumstances. To the tune of about $100,000, $80,000. Yeah, that's right. But those trucks, they're about a $250,000, $300,000 truck, depending on how they're outfitted. They make a good truck. I mean, like I said, that truck was turned over on its side several years ago. I think it was in 2014, and it's been a great truck since then. But it's just one of those things. I mean, when you're dealing with this equipment, it really you just never know. I mean, we've got a truck that we purchased in 2016. It was ordered before I even came to work in Conway. It was delivered last year, and it's a Peterbilt. And that truck, I can't remember how many, it was the first half of its life. If it's a little over a year now, it was down about 60% of the time. Wow. And it was to the point I was talking to Chuck, about possibly trying to give it back to him. I mean, you just never know. You get some that are good and some that, you have to deal with. But these 2 trucks in particular have been
good trucks. So.
Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt? Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
And the emergency clause, Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Pruitt? Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Those pass 6-0. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Cropper. Next up is our Public Safety Committee portion, and we have Mr. Aaron Knight to discuss the consideration and disposal of inventory for the IT department.
Thank you, Mayor Castleberry, members of the council. I'm going for the shortest memo on the agenda and shortest time at the podium. We continue to clean up and organize in the IT department, and we've got a number of items that we're looking to remove from inventory for disposal through e-waste or auction. And I'll take any questions.
I'll try and keep you the shortest man out here. I move that we get rid of this stuff.
Thank you, sir.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
What will be disposed of and what will be, I mean, you don't have to give me like.
Yeah, Jamie and I were talking about that a little bit ago. We're going to go through and see what has a useful value that we actually think we can get something back from auction, and kind of make a determination that way. We've got a buyback on some of these Meraki wireless access points that we think we can get some money there, and some of the other equipment. So we're going to go through it with Jamie.
That's the access points kind of make me a little nervous just because there might be some information on there that.
We're going to wipe them before we send them out. Yeah,
Okay, just, yeah, make sure.
no worries.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you very much.
Passes 6-0. Thank you, Aaron. Next up, we have an ordinance appropriating funds for our annual firefighter testing. The Conway Fire Department, Ms. Mabel Williams will not be able to be here tonight. There's an ordinance to appropriate funds of $2,600 for the test that was administered June the 19th.
Make a motion that we waive the readings.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to waive 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance. I have it 01772. Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion?
72 or 71?
I have 72.
What was 71?
The one right before.
Mr. Garrett, you're up.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Here.
Mr.
Yes.
Ledbetter? Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt? Aye.
Let me
Passes
rephrase my question. Which item on our agenda was number 71?
B6.
I had that as 70. I'm sorry. I missed one. I see where I missed it. My fault.
Next up, we'll have Major Tapley to discuss the consideration to approve the bid for the replacement of the roof at the Animal Welfare Unit. Everybody take a moment to wave at Chief Spradlin at home. He's at home watching us.
He is. Oh, this week
I'm sure he's feeling really, really good right now.
Yeah, yeah. So last year, we began having some problems with the roof out at the Animal Welfare Unit. We had some work done, specifically the skylights out there. At the time, they recommended that we replace the roof. We budgeted for it in this year's budget. We have received 8 bids on the roof. Chief Spradlin has asked that we look at the bids and consider going with Collier Roofing. They're not the cheapest on the list. However, Jancor is an out-of-town company. Covington Roofing is actually the cheapest, but based upon recommendations, we would prefer to go with Collier Roofing.
Go ahead, Andy.
Covington Roofing didn't get good recommendations?
That was my understanding, yes, sir, based upon work that had previously been done.
Did make anybody else sit up and say what's up besides me?
We were just going by work that we've had done in the past in Collier Roofing and the type of roof that we're putting in over there.
What are we putting in?
A TPO.
I'm sorry, say again?
The TPO, the same thing we're putting on City Hall, the plastic membrane
I do know that the county uses Collier for a lot of things, I think. They redid the museum and they redid the building behind it.
Any further questions? Do I have a motion?
I missed the motion.
No, Ian made a motion.
I'll go ahead and throw the motion out there.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this bid for the replacement of the roof, animal welfare unit, the roof from Collier Roofing. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
5-1.
This is 5-1.
Thank you.
Next, we have consideration to dispose of inventory vehicles for the Conway Police Department. Major Tapley.
We have 4 vehicles on there, 2 of which have been used at the PD for patrol use. The other 2 are drug-seized vehicles. They are either at the end of the life or we have no use for them at this time. We're hoping to sell them on public surplus.
Make a motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett, call the vote, please.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? 6-0, Mayor.
6-0. Next up, we have an ordinance appropriating funds to replace the heating and cooling unit for the Conway EOC. We've had 2 breakdowns just recently at the EOC, have we not?
We have, the way it was explained to me is there's a hole in the system and it keeps getting larger. We replace the Freon in it, but it leaks out faster and we're replacing more.
It's in the coal.
It's been a constant problem over the last several months.
Okay. Jamie, have we been in contact with the county on this, on a split on this?
We collected a lot of data last week over that and have numbers prepared to sit down and talk with the judge
Okay.
about that. So we haven't done it yet, but we're ready.
Okay. We due to the nature of the business up there and keeping people comfortable, we had to go ahead and get them fixed. So, and we are looking at replacing 2 of those units correctly and working with the county on, I don't know if it's gonna be a 50-50 or 60-40, but the judge and I visited and they're gonna help us out with it too, since we're partners with them up there.
Make a motion that we waive the readings. Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance 73 with the emergency clause. Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance with the emergency clause. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt? Aye. Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
In the emergency clause, Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt? Aye. Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Those both pass 6-0. And Mr. Tapley, Major Tapley, an ordinance appropriating reimbursement funds from various entities for the Conway Police Department.
Yes, sir. We have reimbursements from different entities, including extra duty services, DUI seatbelt task force, insurance proceeds. The one thing that is a little unusual in this one, we have donations. Those donations are for the child safety fair that we have each year.
Okay. Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
Make a motion for the ordinance, and it's 74.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt? Aye. Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. Thank you, Major.
Thank you.
And last, we have an ordinance amending our personnel policy, employee handbook personnel policy 016-141. And Ms. Bryce will speak to this.
I think it's clear that, and you can see the changes that we are making, they're highlighted in that policy, but if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
make a motion to waive the readings. Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
Make a motion for adoption if we don't have one.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Whoa. Who can go and purchase something? Is it just department heads? Is that correct?
No, there are several authorized purchasers throughout the departments. There are different levels for the departments. It just kind of depends.
Yeah, admins can purchase,
And they can purchase up to $2,500?
No, a PO is required before any purchase.
Okay. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
O 1775. Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt? Aye. Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
yes.
Ms. Mel?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. All right, any other? All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, we are adjourned.
When you were hollering 075, I thought you were calling bingo.
Oh, 75. Oh, 75. I worked a few bingo games before, Mr. Grimes.
You're off.
That's right. Territory.
Right.
Where'd your granddaughter go, Mark?
We still didn't make 8 o'clock. Oh, it's way past bedtime. We still didn't make 8 o'clock.
For our one meeting this month.
I'm working on it,
We'll overlap a day. Where are you gonna be? Hey, Bart, I need to run something by you.
All right.
Yeah.
Mr. Grimes?
Be good.